Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sitheads Meditation Club. My name is John. I help organize this group. Sitheads is a sitting and social group for people interested in deep meditation practice. I like to call us a serious meditation group for non-serious people. If you want to hang out with us, you can just go to sit-heads.com. That's sit-heads.com. Everything we do is free and donation-based. I would love to bring up Stephen Muggan Roshi. I'm going to bring you up now. Hello, Roshi. Nice to see you.
Hi there, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here with
Good.
you. And you said that Muggan is okay as well, right?
Yeah,
Just so I
it is
remember
absolutely.
Cool. Is it okay if I give you a brief third-person introduction?
Sure.
All right. So, Stephen Muggan Roshi is a Buddhist teacher rooted in both Zen and Theravada Buddhist lineages. His Zen lineage is the white plum lineage coming through Bernie Glassman Roshi. He treats Zen and Theravada practice as complementary and works across both, which is, to me, very rare and unusual. Often using guided meditation and direct inquiry aimed at helping students rest in the absolute alongside Theravada concentration and heart practices. He leads several ongoing online-based mentoring groups that you can join, and runs an annual Jhana retreat and hosts multi-week awakening retreats as well. If you want to learn more about Muggan Roshi's work or check out those mentoring groups, his retreats, etc., his website is awakeningdharma.org. All right, so with that out of the way, let's get into it. Muggan, are you ready to have a bit of a chat?
You bet.
All right, cool. And then we'll open it up to Q&A after that. So the first thing I want to talk about, the thing that immediately drew my attention is the nature of your dual lineage. So I originally knew of you as sort of a jhana guy, Pa Auk trained in his famously intense and rigorous style of jhana practice. I did not know about your Zen background, and you've since emphasized it, I think, a bit more, or at least it's come to my attention more prominently in recent years. And it's really interesting to me that you seem to hold both. It doesn't seem like you started with one and then moved to the other, as so often happens, right? For instance, your colleague, maybe colleague's the wrong term, but Shaila Catherine, who also studied under Pa Auk Sayadaw, was originally hanging out with H.W.L. Punja, if I'm not mistaken,
All right.
practicing in his sort of
Papaji.
style. What'd you say?
Papaji.
Papaji, exactly. And then she moved into the Theravada and has since really been rooted there, right? Usually people are rooted in one place, but you seem to hold this dual lineage fairly equally. You haven't seemed to de-emphasize one in favor of the other. That's really interesting. Can you speak to that a bit?
Sure, sure. And for clarification, I did start in the Zen tradition. I've been in that
Mhm.
tradition for 50 years and the
Wow.
Theravada about 20. So it wasn't so much that I left the Zen tradition. I just had some friends who were beginning to study with Pa Auk, and a number of the Theravadan teachers from Spirit Rock were heading to Myanmar to do these often 3-month retreats with him. And I was
Mhm.
quite intrigued by that. So that's really what got me started. For me, I see the Theravadan as being a gradual development program. So we could call it gradual awakening. And in the Zen tradition, there's both the gradual awakening that we have through the practice of Shikantaza meditation and also the more direct, which is through koan work. And so
Hmm.
to me, I think there's a sort of mixing and matching. I tell people I'm not a traditional teacher in either Buddhist tradition. I mix and match according to the student and the sangha's needs.
Could you speak to how you see the respective gradual approaches of the Theravada and the Zen school sort of resonating, differing? Could you do a little compare and contrast there? Since you said
Sure.
The Zen lineages have their own gradual sort of gradualist approach as well. So yeah, how do those compare to one another?
Well, in Zen, we would use Shikantaza and view it as a more gradual ripening process. And really, what we're doing is we're steeping in the absolute, in the source. And the way that I
Shikantaza,
teach,
just for any people who might not have the relevant background who might be watching, that means just sitting, correct?
right. When I was a young student, and even to this day, a lot of the Zen centers you'd go to will give you elaborate instructions on posture and zero instructions on content.
Yeah,
And so
classic.
we were left to our own devices. And as a young student, I went around to some of the senior monastics and asked them privately, "What are you doing in Shikantaza?" And every one gave me a different answer. So I
Hmm.
realized that they were just doing whatever they were doing. So as a teacher, I've come up with a three stage or three-step process with Shikantaza,
Hmm.
which also correlates with the Theravadan concentration practice. And I borrowed this from the Chan tradition, which is stage one is unity of body mind. Stage two is the unity of inner and outer atmospheres. And stage three is opening to the vastness, opening to the absolute.
Hmm.
In the Theravadan practices, there's a number of practices you would start. If you showed up at my teacher's monastery in Myanmar tomorrow, you'd be given Anapanasati, your breath awareness meditation.
Yeah.
And that would be your meditation unless it was well established that it was outside your reach, and then you could be moved to something else. But
Four
everybody
elements
starts with
practice or
that.
something.
Yeah, four elements is the typical direction one goes in after
Hmm.
that. But the breath awareness leads to deepening concentration. There are three stages of concentration, three levels. The third is absorption or jhana, which is the one that people are most interested in experiencing. And it is a very direct purification of mind process. Our mind purifies in gradual steps as we get frustrated with the practice and keep going. And finally, when we're resting in jhana, there's no sense of self, there's no thought, and we're steeping in an energetic field. The felt sense is like being in a radio frequency that's too intense. And
Hmm.
so we do it a little at a time to build up, and our consciousness begins to take on and resonate at that level. Once we can abide there for a minimum of an hour without interruption, then we can proceed on to second jhana. When I did the
Hmm.
jhanas with the Sayadaw, he required me to do 3 hours uninterrupted in each jhana to be able to go on to the next one. I don't
Yeah,
hold students
and
to
his
that same level.
criteria for what qualifies as a jhana are famously severe, if I recall correctly.
It's a high bar, right?
Yeah. So, okay, so there's a bunch of interesting stuff in there. We can go in so many different directions. I'm gonna try and go in all of them in a way that doesn't seem too spasmodic. We'll see how I do. Um, so first, really struck by I gotta circle back to this idea that you asked a bunch of teachers how to do shikantaza and they all gave you different answers. I was expecting you to say something like they refused to give you an answer, or they held up a flower, or something appropriately cryptic. But no, they gave you instructions. They were just all different. So
They weren't teachers. They were senior students.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, because surely there is a shikantaza, or there at least, or perhaps there are shikantazas. There are practices, however inchoate or amorphous or hard to articulate, that are being passed down, right? It can't just be that everyone's freestyling and truly doing something different, and it's essentially BS, right? That I just can't believe that that's true, that it's just sort of nonsense ultimately.
Yeah, I think ultimately people get to where they're sitting in present moment awareness and they're opening in their own way to touching into the absolute. So they're sitting in that field. But how they get there, like I talked a lot about my Zen meditation was like a hot air balloon pilot. I could get up in the air, but I never knew where I was going or where I'd land. And
Yeah, Pa Auk will
that's part
help
of the
with that for
problem.
sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Pa Auk will tell you exactly where you're going.
Yes.
Um, no, that's so interesting because I almost think of I don't think of those aspects of the Zen practice and the Theravada as being harmonious or capable of harmonization. Like I tend to think of them as essentially aesthetic differences, right? That are there on purpose, or stylistic differences, not purely
Hmm.
aesthetic. Stylistic differences that are there on purpose. Like the Theravada are there to hand you. Pa Auk will hand you a textbook. I've read it. Like
Hmm.
he has very clear, precise instructions. My sense now, I'm not a Zen student. So this is all the view of an outsider, a reader, someone who's dabbled, sat a session or two. Um, but my understanding is that the lack of clarity there is a feature, not a bug. That
Right.
they haven't tried and failed to be more clear. They're intentionally
Correct.
not nailing things down. So how is it that you get the two to work together? Because it seems like they're just a, a road diverging in a wood.
Well, I think all meditators can benefit from learning one or more concentration meditations.
Mm,
We all can improve our meditative concentration. That's what breath awareness does beautifully, is we
sure.
see exactly what's getting in the way, and that's us. And so we learn to stop buying into and being enamored with our stories and our memories, with our planning, with all the things we normally do for self-soothing. They
Yeah.
become impediments to the meditation. So we learn through trial and error and through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to start letting go of those things. And once people can develop into access concentration, which is the second level of meditative concentration, that can be applied to any other meditation they do. That's the beauty
Sure.
of it. And to say third level absorption or jhana is only available in technical concentration meditation. You need an unchanging object for that to be a possibility. So some of the other meditations, like we talked about four elements, earth, water, fire, and air, that can't be used for jhana because the object is changing
Mm.
in that meditation.
So this makes perfect sense to me that concentration practice, if some people bristle at calling it concentration practice. They think it sounds too forceful, but whatever. Samadhi practice,
Right.
stabilizing attention, concentration, whatever. Your point is that's basically good for everything. There's nothing there's no meditative practice that will be a hindrance for.
Right.
And the Theravada is really good at teaching that stuff.
Well, and
So,
the other piece that the Theravada really does offer a superior practice is the Brahma Viharas, the heart
mm,
practices. The Zen tradition doesn't have those as part. Well, to say today, there are teachers who teach some of that, but traditionally it was never taught. I heard
yeah.
teachers mention compassion a couple of times in my, decades in that tradition. So to me, that's the other beauty that Theravada brings because you can work with both it as a transformational practice, meaning improving your personality by working with different categories of beings, friends, neutral people, difficult people, benefactors, etc. And
Yeah.
you can also get in touch with the felt sense of each of those heart practices, which that in itself can lead to absorption or jhana. So you can
Mm,
take them quite deep, and that would be the transcendent application of those practices. I write
yeah.
about that in my book, Buddha's Heart.
Buddha's heart. Mm. Yeah, and yeah, so the Brahma Viharas are among the objects that Pa Auk Sayadaw would deem suitable for jhana practice.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you've got your concentration practice, you've got your Brahma Viharas. Those are, you would say, sort of standout areas of the Theravada that can really enrich one's Zen practice.
Right.
There is concentration practice in a lot of, I mean, I was taught when I sat some Zen sessions, they teach the beginners breath counting. right?
Right.
And so forth. So there is a samadhi or a samatha practice taught in a lot of Zen schools, but your feeling is just that the Theravada the Theravadan canon there is just a bit more rich.
Right. I started in the Zen tradition counting breaths for 2 years, and it's a great practice. We use counting as a support for concentration practice in Theravada, but
Mhm.
the problem is I took the numbers to be the object. The
Yeah.
breath should be the object, and the numbers should be supporting maintaining awareness with the breath. So that's a place where it sort of fell down a little bit in the Zen tradition. They at least the way I was taught was I wasn't paying attention to breath. I was simply counting breaths.
Got it. Yeah. Um, and that's a point of distinction that's made that many sort of Theravadan or Theravada influenced teachers are quite clear on. You talked about Shikantaza as a gradual approach, which is interesting because I would have considered it again as like an armchair speculator, right, with no authority. I to actually know anything here. I would have thought of, I mean, I did spend some time in the Dzogchen tradition, which I think feels like a cousin of certain aspects of Zen,
Mhm.
at least to me. And you know, when you say that shikantaza is gradual, my sense was always that there's sort of like a binary, like sometimes you fall in and sometimes you don't. Um, in the sense of uh, that sort of unborn, pristine, uh, I don't even know what to call it, but like you describe it as gradual, steeping. So is it that you call it the absolute? Is it that you get a deeper and deeper and deeper experience of the absolute? You start with like a little feathers of it, and then it becomes richer. And what's that like?
I think feature it as a field, and we can enter the field. And when we're first starting and make contact, that's where we'll abide for a while. We have to build up trust to go deeper because it's a reality that's quite foreign and can be quite unnerving to us because of the lack of the normal human psychology and sense of self operating. So it's a
Right.
different world, and yes, we get acclimated, we go a little deeper, we get a little freaked out, and we get what I call the accordion effect. We get expanded to a new level, and then we snap back. The
Yeah,
personality
yeah,
snaps us back, which we've all been through. So, but
yeah.
even in the Dzogchen Rigpa practice, I did it with the same teacher you did. I did it
Hmm.
with Sokni Rinpoche and his brother Mingyur Rinpoche, and it's a gradual practice. There's 3 steps: samatha with support, without support, and then Rigpa. So
Yep.
you're still using concentration practice. Then you're taking the concentrated awareness itself as the object, and then you're dropping the perspective of observer. So observer and observed collapse, and
Yeah.
that becomes the Rigpa state.
Now, when I studied with Sokmi Rinpoche years and years and years ago, I was so green that, I mean, I'm still, you know, only an egg, right? I don't just mean like the shape of like what my head looks like right now. I just mean that I'm like I still feel very new to everything, but and very much a beginner, but I was really a beginner then. So when he talked about shamatha with support, that I got. Pay attention to the breath. Shamatha without support versus practicing real Dzogchen, resting in Rigpa, I was not capable of understanding the difference.
Mhm.
So I still don't think I am. But I want to throw out there a practice that I've done and some experiences that I've had. And maybe you could help me understand where it falls on that continuum, if at all, right? Or from the Zen perspective. So the experience. I have of what I have been calling just personally to myself sort of objectless shamatha. I guess what Sokni Rinpoche would have called shamatha without support, though I don't know if this is that, is the idea is when I'm practicing with an object like the breath, my attention gets grabbed by some mental event, right? I get interested in something. And then my move essentially is to lose interest in that and reestablish interest in my object, right? That's how I tend
Hmm.
to think about it. Just lose interest in that, regain interest in this. And then, but there's this other practice that I have done and do sometimes where if I get pulled in by a thought or a distraction or whatever, I'll lose interest in that, but I won't reestablish interest in something else. In other words, I'm not redirecting the vector of attention to some
Hmm.
other object. I'm dropping the vector of attention into, I'm not using the attentional faculty. And I'm just like, and then and it is possible to sort of undistractedly be like that until
Hmm.
something else grabs my interest and then I let go of it's like my interest wants to my attention wants to contract around things. And
Right.
instead of changing that by having it contract around the correct thing, I just let it uncontract and then don't do anything else.
Right.
What's
Yeah.
that?
What you're describing is shikantaza. That's just sitting. You're
Hmm.
sitting in the open awareness. When something snags you, you either let it go or you exhaust it, and then you're back in the open awareness. So
Hmm.
it's constantly returning to the open awareness is the traditional shikantaza practice.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, it's such a fascinating practice. It feels so interesting because it's I'm so unused to not using my attention at all. I'm so used to all of my experience of the world being through a vectored experience of attention, aiming at something, looking at something.
Right.
Um, and I'm not saying that the whole time I'm doing that, I'm in some incredible rigpa state of primordial enlightenment, but there is just this interesting feeling of just like not using my attention at all.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and is that would that be so that's Shikantaza. I imagine that also has something in common with the sort of Chan silent illumination. Would that be right?
Yes, silent illumination and shikantaza are the same.
Hmm.
What you're also talking about is the shamatha without support. Support is having an object. The shamatha without support is objectless concentration, which is what you're
Mm.
talking about.
Yeah. And attentionless too, right? That
Right.
to me is the thing that really hammered it home. Objectless, I couldn't understand, but now attentionless, that I understand. And
Yeah,
so,
you're with awareness, not attention.
yeah, fascinating. And is that I could see how concentration, how shamatha with support, how the sort of more like anapanasati, for instance, breath practice, I could see how it sets you up. It would be very hard, I think, for many people to jump straight to the completely unsupported shikantaza that
Hmm.
we're talking about here. It's like I don't know. It just feels like there's so much preliminary work of like learning how to use some basic mental muscles that you don't know how to
Right.
use. And then you add a bunch of complexity by now saying, and also don't pay attention to anything at all, right? You need to
Right.
learn like the disengagement move.
Right.
And it seems like it's easier to learn disengage and then move it over here. Otherwise, you're learning two new things at once, right? Disengage and let attention drop completely. That would be maybe there are some extraordinary people. I'm sure there are people who are just built for that, but I know that I wouldn't be. So bringing in
Most
the
people are not.
concentration makes
Most people are
sense.
not. So that's why if someone comes to me, I start them with the breath awareness practice because that gives them an object, something to do, and they begin to see their patterning of distraction. And also, I have them work with a meditation I slightly innovated called innate goodness, which is simply metta for ourselves without any support phrases or anything else. It's just being
Hmm.
with the innate goodness itself. And I encourage them to do this on and off the cushion. because that builds continuity, which means the next time you sit, you can go deeper because you're already a little bit in contact with the meditation.
Hmm. This innate goodness practice, is that something where if I were to go online, I could find a video of you guiding through it or something? Because I'm curious
Yes.
about, it's not a practice I've experienced or heard of. So is that
Yeah,
available?
I slightly innovated it. Yeah, it's on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, and there's absolutely innate goodness practice, and it's basically we get in contact with a memory. One easy memory is if we've been around infants, whether animal or human, we
Yeah.
can see them exhibit a goodness without trying to perform. They're just good. And that's the goodness we want to resonate with and identify locating in ourselves. And then we simply rest in that innate goodness. I might call it our innate goodness, which isn't actually accurate. It's really something that's objective rather than subjective, but we
Mm.
rest in our experience of innate goodness. And that in itself helps us both by the heart juiciness, and also it helps us fill in that deficit we feel about being worthless or valueless, unlovable, bad. It helps start filling that in so we feel like we have a right to be here. We have a
Mm.
right to awakening.
Yeah. And now the term innate goodness sounds to me is very redolent of the more non-dual traditions like Zen, and especially I'm reminded of Chogyam Trungpa, in terms of just the specific language. But the actual substance of the technique sounds quite Theravadan influenced, right? It
Mhm.
sounds like it's an innovation on top of metta practice. So
It
again,
is.
it's
That's
that
exactly what it
dual.
is.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, no, you said so too. But yeah, that's super interesting. So all right, something else I want to talk to you about before we open it up to questions is, I've heard you talk about teaching awakening and cessation, which is very interesting to me because that makes quite clear that you see awakening and cessation as two different things. So cessation, I understand to be, in the certainly the Burmese Vipassana traditions of Theravada Buddhism, there's a prized experience, right, that comes as the culmination of Vipassana practice, often called cessation, which is actually kind of a literal translation of nibbana or nirvana.
Correct.
Um, and it's a sort of switching off of basically everything except perhaps of a very subtle form of consciousness that's hard to describe, but essentially um, extinction of the five aggregates, right? And that like a subjective going out and then returning, which is supposed to be very purifying and powerful. That's what
Hmm.
makes someone an awakened being in the Theravada, right? At least in the Burmese interpretation, what makes someone a stream enterer, a first stage enlightened being, first stage saint, is having had that cessation experience. Now, in Zen, I don't hear cessation talked about at all. But
Hmm.
that doesn't mean it isn't, and obviously you talk about it. Um, I hear awakening talked about in Zen as more along the lines of like a profound, fully conscious shift, right? And similarly in the Dzogchen tradition where I used to hang out, awakening was thought more of as recognizing the intrinsic nature of mind, the awakened quality, the already present perfection of everything. It's like a sort of shift of perspective. It's certainly not a loss of subjective experience or perspective. So, what's the deal? How do you like how do you hold those two together? Why do different practices produce different ones? Which one's the real awakening? Which one's better? Which one sucks? Just like give us the tea, Roshi.
Sure. So first, when I say awakening, I'm including both the Zen Kensho experience and the Theravada cessation experience. They
Okay.
are distinct experiences.
Yeah.
The experience of cessation is a cessation of all mentality and all materiality. There's no awareness, there's no consciousness. It's a lights out experience.
Yeah.
And it's very, very, to me, the way I frame it, the way I experience it, is cessation is the source of the absolute. So say it's the hub of the absolute. So out
Mm,
of this the purest nothingness that exists comes all of reality. That's the potency that that nothingness has,
mm,
that cessation has. For Kensho awakening in my lineage, as I teach it and confirm it, a Kensho has to have three components. There has to be a deep no self experience. So I don't know who I am at all. There has to be a deep unity love experience. Love is everything, including me. And then
mm,
there has to be the recognition this is my true identity. So all three of those need to be present for it to be a confirmed Kensho experience.
mm,
The cessation experience, the ways one can access cessation traditionally are you either do it through the jhanas, through the access concentration of the eighth jhana. There's some techniques to do it called Nirodha Samapatti,
yeah.
and it's believed to be very, very rare. Only rare individuals can do it, but there are people I know who have done it. The other way is you go through all the jhanas, then you go through the whole 8 stages of insight of Vipassana, the seventh stage being the insight of terror, which is actually fear of extinction.
Hmm.
And that is an issue that has to be resolved before cessation can open. And then we take nibbana as our object, is how Pa Auk would frame it. There's a third way of doing it, which I can do through guided meditations. I can bring people up into the territory of cessation. I can't bring them into cessation, but the absolute lets, or it moves through me to bring them into and up to the portal of cessation to the point people can feel the tractor beam, the pull, inviting them into cessation. Each of
Mm,
us has to assent. You have to say yes on your own. You can't get pulled in unless you agree. And it's a lights out experience. So everything goes out. But after cessation, there is an awakeness that's palpable.
yeah.
And my next book coming out in May is called Living Awakeness, where I talk about 10 or 15 of these qualities of awakeness, of what it's like. The main criteria for both Kensho and cessation to be stream entry, for either to be stream entry, is there has to be a dramatic shift in personality view. People
Right.
misinterpret that to mean my personality is gone. That's a mistake. It's not gone. But it's not the primary vantage point.
Yeah.
That has changed to it is a vantage point and the objective perspective of our true nature is also a vantage point we can take.
Mm. Right. The personality is no longer seen as fundamentally defining. Uh,
Yeah. One of my
yeah.
students said it really well. He said the shelf the personality was on is broken.
Mm. Interesting. And so these are very, so, I'm always, I almost don't even know what to do with this question because it's like so fundamental. It just seems like they point in such different directions. And, I think one of the charges leveled at Theravada Buddhism, at least as it's practiced these days, and I've heard it leveled by folks who practice in a tradition like Dzogchen, is it's world denying, it's life denying.
Right.
And you could see that from your description of cessation. It's like you describe Kensho, everything is love, no separation between self and world, right? Just a sort of expansive vastness suffused with love. And then the other one's lights out. Everything is just gone. It's like
Mhm.
it's death, right? It's death essentially. How do you answer those charges that, well, one of these sounds lush, rich, life affirming, embracing, and the other sounds dry, um, nihilistic, antinatalist in some senses. That it's it's life denying. Yeah.
Mhm.
What would you say to that?
Well, the first thing we need to take into consideration is the Buddha was an aversive type. So his orientation towards his own life and practice and the tone of Theravada Buddhism is a kind of rejection of life.
Hmm.
And so this is part of the journey of the monastics is to cut off all of these sensual pleasures and reject the world. And so the highest goal of Theravada is the Arahant, and the great gift the Arahant gets is he's not going to be or she's not going to be reborn again in human form. So they see getting off the wheel of existence as the goal. And I have some students who they hold that naturally. They want to get off the wheel of existence.
Hmm.
Most of my students, and this is the shift to Mahayana, where Mahayana came into China. The Chinese are a lot more life affirming and engaged in the world, family, all these different things. So the Mahayana came up with the Bodhisattva ideal, which is the commitment, the Bodhisattva vows to be commit to being reborn until all beings have crossed over.
Well,
So
but
that's a
The
very different.
Mahayana, but the Mahayana did emerge in India, didn't it? Among before Buddhism traveled to China, right? There was even
Yeah,
within the milieu of early Buddhism, right? There
right.
was.
It began, there was a philosophical shift that was underway. It didn't land as a practice or as a
Hmm,
tradition until it hit China, in my
hmm,
understanding, until the
okay,
Chan tradition took it up. And that was
okay,
really in China, they really combined the Buddhism, this new Buddhism with the Bodhisattva ideal with Confucianism and Taoism. So we
right.
have great affinity for lineage. We also believe in some of the mysterious aspects of the universe. So it's all tied together.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're very different. But the experience of cessation is, I, when I first heard of it, I viewed it as a kind of removing, a cutting kind of experience. And in
Yeah.
fact, it's not like that. It's like slipping in to the deepest, warmest place that contains the richest peace and stillness you can imagine. So that's what you're entering. That's what consciousness and awareness begin to enter into and then shut off is this beautiful peace, stillness, emptiness.
Hmm. So it sounds like you're saying aesthetically, there is an ascetic, a life-denying strain to Theravada Buddhism that emerged out of the Buddha's own personality. I might also add perhaps just the prevailing philosophy of the time. Everyone was trying to get off the wheel,
Sure.
right? But that the cessation experience is not itself necessarily life denying, ascetic, that it's fully compatible with a life embracing spiritual orientation. Am I
Yeah.
sort of, I don't want to put words in your
Right.
mouth. Would you say that's
And
right?
absolutely. And the folks who awaken out of cessation, they are so full of life and awakeness. I mean, it's really like they're reborn in many ways. And I'll say one thing that one of the I guess guidelines I've come up with is somebody has to have a cessation experience that's at least 30 minutes or more for it to be a stream entry experience. Less
Hmm.
than that is really beneficial, but it doesn't seem to shift the personality view enough
Huh.
to actually be stream entry, in my view. For the
Oh,
Zen teachers that I'm going to start training, they're going to both have to have had at least a kensho experience and a cessation experience. I want them to be able to support both because I think it's important to have both experiences.
which do you consider to be more easily accessible for the average person, or is that impossible to say?
I'd say the kensho is more accessible.
Hmm. Interesting. Do you feel that the change brought about by the cessation experience is more profound? Is cessation more transformative obviously things can vary from person to person, but like all else being equal, would you say that it's the deeper transformation than the Kensho experience?
Well, the way I view the Zen awakenings there's three of them. Kensho's a generic term we use to mean any awakening, but it's the first awakening. A
Mm,
deeper awakening is called Satori, where the personality is no longer the foundation. Our true nature becomes our inner foundation, and that to
mm.
me is equivalent to the cessation awakeness. So I
Ah,
consider both of those stream entry. And
got
then
it.
there's a third awakening in Zen called Daigo Tete, which translates as final or full awakening, which it's not. But what happens is the true nature shifts out of the position of our foundation, and the absolute becomes the foundation. So that's a very, very high level of awakeness. But I would say the Satori and the cessation will produce pretty comparable levels of awakening in individuals.
Hmm. And so you say this is very interesting. I mean, I love this nerdy stuff. You don't want to get too trapped in it and have it distract you from your practice. But since we're here on Zoom, I feel like we can have permission to nerd out. So comparable levels of awakeness, cessation, satori. Now, so you would say that they're comparable in degree. Are they similar in kind in terms of the resultant transformation, essentially the person who comes out the other end? Are you transformed in the same ways?
That's going to be individualistic. What I would say is, if we're speaking generically, I would say yes, the awakeness of each is fairly comparable. So, how the refresh, the aliveness that is evident in that individual is going to be fairly equivalent.
Are you saying that the nature of the change is fairly equivalent, not just the degree of the change?
What do you mean by nature of change?
Well, what I mean is, a transformative experience can transform you in a bunch of different ways.
Hmm.
Maybe the sense of self is thinned out. Maybe love arises more naturally. Maybe concentration comes more readily and
Hmm.
easily. Maybe you don't hold to the personality in quite the same way, or there maybe you experience less compulsive craving, right? There are so many different
Hmm.
take your pick on whatever map you want to
I
use, but there's
think,
so many ways a person can change. Are they qualitatively, not just quantitatively, similar? Do they cause the same
yeah,
sorts of shifts?
I would say all of those things you listed would be things I would expect to see in the individual having either the satori or cessation of 30 minutes or more.
Got it. So it's not like if you took Jane, person A, and then you have a future where they experience cessation and a future where they experience Satori at the same time, right? Like in each alternate future. You're getting basically the same awakened person coming out the other end, is what you're saying.
I'd say so. And again, we're speaking generally.
Yeah, of
Specifics might
course.
vary, but generally speaking, yes, I would
Big
expect to
disclaimer.
see
And
the same.
yeah,
Yeah.
now a lot of meditation teachers or Dharma teachers refuse to speak generally like that, even with the caveat. I appreciate the caveat, but there's a lot of the time it's like, well, I really couldn't speak to that, or it's so individual. So I appreciate your willingness to venture out into hazardous waters with me. Um,
Well,
but
well,
I
the other
think
the other
that
distinction is I have enough students having these experiences. I've been able to make conclusive hypotheses on
hmm,
it. So it's not like I've got one or two people. I've got dozens of people that have experienced these. So that gives me a good body to work with to make some conclusions about.
fair, fair. And yeah, something that you mentioned, I wish we had time to talk about it, but we don't because I want to go to the Q&A now. But you did mention, you sort of said that, you described shockingly high sort of hit rates in terms of students experiencing kensho or cessation through working with you. Then when we have our second interview, which hopefully you'll be gracious enough to grant someday down the line, we can dig into that. It's obviously so much more to
Sure.
talk about. But um, are you down to open it up to Q&A at this point,
Sure.
Mugen? Awesome. All right, everyone. So we're going to do Q&A. So I hope you have questions. I see some already coming in, and we'll get started with Q&A. Okay. Julian, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, my question is basically, are there preparatory practices that you would ask a student to do before you guide them through a cessation? And if someone wanted to be guided through a cessation, how would they engage with you? What's the process, protocol?
Sure. Yeah, typically, like I mentioned, I start people, recommend they start in the same place with breath awareness, meditation, and innate goodness. And they would have to sort of work from there if they need to work some of the heart practices to sort of prepare themselves and then move into Shikantaza. I've got one of my mentoring groups is called Demystifying Awakening, which is the title of my book on awakening. And folks from that group, we meet one day a month. I lead 3 guided meditations and talk about some aspect of meditation. We're doing it Saturday, and I'm doing it on cessation. So I talk about it, and they learn some of the mechanics of it. But most of these folks then come on a 3-week in-person retreat, awakening retreat, and there I do deep guided meditations up towards the absolute and into towards cessation in the absolute. And typically, that's what sparks people into either when they're with me into either kensho or cessation experiences.
Thank you. That answers my question. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian, and thank you, Mugen. Matt, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thanks, John. Roshi, thank you so much for being here. I've gotten a lot out of your videos and actually one of your books, so honored to be speaking with you. My question is about the absolute, and I was wondering if you could help place it in relation to either Shinyo or Tatata. And I was wondering if it fits there or it doesn't.
I don't know those terms. Can you define them for me?
Oh, so Tatata is suchness in Pali,
Okay,
and I think
okay,
Shinyo is the kind of comparative term in Japanese.
okay. Yeah, so suchness, yeah, suchness is the term that's used in the Zen tradition. The way that I would interpret those is they're pointing more towards the quality of presence, of the beingness of the absolute, the here-ness. Like, for example, tonight, some of you could be experiencing a quality and atmosphere that were in a certain particular field. Uh, we might say rarefied if we were going to elevate ourselves, but just a very special field. And that's more the quality of presence. So to me, that's what I would use the term suchness for. Would you use it in a different way?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
And I'm doing a day long on living from presence next Sunday, by the way, which
Oh,
is on Dana donation only on my website.
fantastic. Thank you, Roshi.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Mugen. Next, we have a question that I've been asked to read. Hi, John. Can you ask about overcoming fear of extermination/death in the context of cessation or not? Will be lovely to hear Roshi's perspective.
Yeah, this is why we have the heart practices, that we do these, particularly taking them as a felt sense meditation, and this is orienting toward them with the potential for absorption or jhana. By making that kind of contact, we are going to be identifying whatever's incongruent in us with that heart quality of the absolute. And that begins a purification. And that also develops trust. One of the important recommendations I make to students is when you get to a new territory, you step into a new area you've not been in before. Again, I mentioned the accordion effect. The personality tries to snap shut again. But you need to reassure yourself, I've touched into something new, nothing bad happened. I know it's safe at least to go there. So this builds our trust as we go deeper and deeper into the absolute. And this is true of cessation also. There's a concept I've introduced called the cessation waiting room, where when people get close to cessation but aren't ready to say yes, they can hang out, feeling cessation, feeling the draw, and they don't need to go in. You can only go in if you say yes. So you can hang out there, and that works that material too by being near that really rich peace and stillness. It really softens and softens us to where we can get to the point that we can potentially say, yes, take me.
Thanks for that, Mugen. I hope that was helpful to the questioner. I have another one that I've been asked to read. By the way, this is our last question in the queue. So if you either have a second question, or if you haven't asked a question and you want to, this is your moment. We are here with Stephen Muggan Snyder Roshi. Don't waste this precious opportunity. Do not squander your life, as Dogen said. So, all right. Anyway, here's this question I was asked to read. Can one get a kensho awakening experience through pure jhana practice? If not, why not?
Mm-hmm. Can one have a kensho experience? No, because in the jhana experience, well, let me say it differently. I think there could be a potential if one is doing Brahma Vihara jhanas, heart jhanas, that would definitely has the potential for one to have the unity quality. And in the jhana, there would be no sense of self, but there wouldn't be a perception of no self. It simply is no self. And there wouldn't be the recognition that's necessary for kensho. So I think doing the Brahmavihara jhana would prime the pump in terms of unity, but you'd still need to do some practice that cultivates no self. And then those coalesce in an awakening where they come together. One opens and flashes the other open. So it's like it sparks the other. And then there's a complete experience. And again, there has to be the wholehearted recognition this is truly who and what I am.
Thanks for that, Mugen. Hopefully beneficial to the questioner. All right, we're on to, let's see. All right, we've got a bunch of second questions coming in. Cool. All right, first one is from our friend Julian. Julian, you want to go ahead?
Hello again. I have a question with regards to koan practice because I've begun working with koans maybe 9 months ago at the local Montreal Zen Center.
Okay.
But it's a bit like Shikantaza. There's a lot of like the instructions are kind of vague around how to work with it. It's mostly done by negation of what not.
Are you working Mu?
It's they emphasize like finding my own questions. So I
Oh,
played with
okay.
different questions. First, who am I? Then what is it? And these are like I think the two main questions that I'm working on right now. And they tend to emphasize like what not to do as opposed of what to do. And I'm just curious if because I've experienced in Vipassana, and basically so the way that I'm using the koan is basically get in touch, use kind of distill the curiosity that's intrinsic in the question and use it to kind of explore everything that's in consciousness. So it's like I'm just kind of asking this question of like, what is it with everything that comes up, basically, or wherever my attention lands. But I have no idea if like I'm doing it correctly, basically, or like I don't know. I know what you think about it. Would you basically advise somebody to work with koan?
Yeah, what the way you're approaching it to me is that you're using it to contact whatever's in consciousness and apply the question to whatever's arising. And that's one approach. The other approach is once you land on your question, one of the famous Huado questions of Chan Buddhism is, what am I? Not who am I, but what am I?
Mm-hmm.
And so one would hold that what am I? And I recommend people initially treat it like a mantra. You're just repeating it again and again internally. What am I? What am I? What am I? What am I? And eventually it begins to stick. And as it begins to land where you don't need to keep forcefully repeating it, you can narrow the question down to the most important word. And it might be what or it might be am. People pick those two different words, then you stay with that word. And I tell people the way to hold it is keep it on the tip of your breath. So every breath, it should be what, or it should be am. Uh, and you just keep holding that close, intimate, as much as you can 24/7. And eventually you'll start drilling down into it. Like with am, there's a whole lot that can come from that. If you drill into am, all of life can be contained in there. All of love, all of that's available. So as you drill in, then you'll get to a point, a certain inner tension point of an emptiness, and then that can spark into kensho.
For me, like I get like it distills into everything, like almost like it's like tea, like tea that diffuses into a cup.
Mhm.
But there tends to be also periods of intense frustration. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah, and there is frustration until you settle down with it. So the best thing to do is land on your question, be clear about what question is juicy to you. It feels like important, and also you feel a little nervous when you contact it. Then that's the one to hold, and then don't change your question.
Okay.
Stay with it and distill it down to the most important word of that question for you, and then hold that word without changing it or finding something else to do. And if you get where it's too much, you can always just practice Shikantaza and then come back to the koan when you feel ready for it. But keep it close. That's the main thing. This is why I think I did well with the jhana practice, was because I had worked with koans before I did that retreat. I knew how to keep something close 24/7, and that was the key to that practice.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Nice seeing you.
Thank you,
You'll see me
Julian, and
again.
thank you, Muggan. All right. Matt has another question. Matt, would you like to go ahead and ask?
Yes, thank you. So follow on from my previous question, I'd like to know the absolute and cessation, what their relationship are, and is the absolute a gloss for nibbana and cessation for nirodha? I'm coming from a Tara background, or something else exalted as well.
The way that I frame it and have experienced it is the absolute is the source of all manifestation and creation. It has two, and again, this is conceptualizing it, it has two primary functions of the manifest and the unmanifest. The manifest has the love, the unity, the presence, the pure awareness, the brightness. And the unmanifest has the darkness, has nothingness, emptiness, absence, and peace and stillness. So both of these are created from cessation. Cessation's the source of the absolute. But to open to cessation, we follow the unmanifest side. We follow the absence, peace, and stillness. And that takes us or allows us to approach cessation. I don't consider the absolute to be nibbana. I consider cessation to be nibbana. And my understanding of nirodha is it's another way to say cessation. But there's the term I mentioned, nirodha samapatti, which is the technique of going from access concentration for eighth jhana into the absolute and to potentially make contact with cessation. So, and you probably know that that's considered a rare possibility.
Attainment, yeah. So, so it sounds almost like, so we've, at least from the Theravada map, we've between cessation and nibbana, those are captured. And it sounds like maybe the absolute is an interpretation or is another layer that maybe Theravada just doesn't speak about.
Right.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't. And just to know that for cessation, again, we're going to we're going to follow peace and stillness. I've got a video online you can watch or listen to called Peace Meditation with Guru Viking, and people have reported both kensho and cessation simply watching or listening to that video regularly. which I have no idea how that happens, but it'll at least it'll steep you in the territory. You'll be able to feel the territory if you follow that video for a while. You don't need to watch me, I'm just talking. But if you listen to it, particularly at night in the dark, it can have, just let yourself be impacted. That's the secret.
That's
It's
great. That was a wonderful video, and I'm going to have to watch it again, obviously. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Pat. Thank you, Muggan. Okay, looks like our last question is one that I've been asked to read. Okay. I am fascinated with both jhana, with both the jhana and Zen/awakening mentoring programs you teach. Given I have only 1 hour of practice per day available to me, will I be better off just choosing one, or is there benefit in both? Also, how do I choose?
Yeah, I would say if you feel like there's a need to develop meditative concentration, then I would suggest doing breath awareness meditation for a month. If you feel at the end of that month that you're getting well concentrated, and when I say practice with it, I mean spend the hour on the cushion doing it, but also maintain contact with the breath to the best of your ability off the cushion too. The continuity is key if you want to develop deep concentration. And then when you feel you've got deep concentration, then watch one of my videos on Shikantaza and let yourself be drawn into that. And then you can even try that peace meditation I mentioned. So that's how I would use them. But typically, I recommend committing to a practice for, say, a month. And then at the end of the month, you can decide if I want to change to a heart practice or something else. But you want to commit to a specific time frame. Otherwise, the personality is saying, oh, I'm bored, let's switch to this, let's switch to that. And we don't deep dive anywhere. So we want to commit ourselves enough to do a deep dive in whatever practice we're choosing.
And when you say a month, so for this person, that would be a month at 1 hour of formal practice a day, and then trying to stay in contact, as you said, with
Right.
the breath throughout the day.
Yeah,
Got it.
and cultivating silence. So trying to avoid social media, too much worldly news, really limit that. That agitates the mind like crazy. You want to calm the mind for these practices.
Mm, yeah, great advice. All right, so that was the last question. I'm going to use my special prerogative and ask you a follow-up question, and then we'll wrap up. We're right about at the end. Um, what is the degree of concentration, the degree of samadhi that you would say one should have before, uh, you know, before moving focus to shikantaza? Um, I know, like, for instance, the level of concentration required to do Pa Auk's jhanas is something I think that very few people can do outside of a retreat. For shikant and right now I'm actually on a 2 week home retreat. I popped out to do this interview, but I'm about halfway through a 2 week home retreat where I'm just doing. I've been in silence otherwise, and I'm just doing anapanasati,
Mhm.
and it's just amazing to see how many layers there are, how deep it goes, how many subtle ways of commenting on what you're doing and wrapping the experience in subtle conceptuality and reflection. It goes so deep. How much of that do you need to slough off
Mhm.
before it's even worth spending time with Shikantaza?
You want to be the first level of meditative concentration is momentary concentration. Where's your awareness in this moment? So anyone sitting down to meditate, we all have momentary concentration. Once we're staying with our meditative object, in this case, you're working with the breath. If you're with the breath for 10 to 15 minutes or more without serious interruption, then you're starting access concentration, the second level. Wait till you're deep enough in access concentration that you're experiencing some of the joy and bliss in the body and mind, where you're just feeling really good, and you're able to stay with the breath for, say, 30 minutes or more. And that's a time when you can switch to shikantaza or rigpa or something else. You'll bring a lot of good, deep concentration. If you feel that concentration wane a lot, then come back to the breath reestablish access concentration. I would call it mid-access concentration, and then go back to the other meditation.
Mm.
That's what Pa Auk had us do when we worked some of the other practices after the jhanas, like the 32 body parts and skeleton and etc. We would
Mm.
keep the jhanas up or keep concentration up to then be able to penetrate deeply into the other practices.
And so just to make sure I got that right, you're describing access concentration as you going for 10 or 15 minutes with no distraction at all or no serious.
No significant. You're not leaving the breath.
Mm.
So you can have a thought, you can think, I want a sandwich for lunch, but you're not, if you don't leave the breath and have the thought, then you're still with the breath. But if you
Uh-huh.
go there and start imagining what kind of sandwich and bread, or should you order out or make it yourself, but you go through all that analysis, you're gone from the breath. That doesn't count. You got to come back. So it's staying with the breath. It's like baseball. You keep your foot on the base, even though
Mm.
you can stretch off from the base some.
Okay. That's not an absolutely preposterous level of
No,
concentration.
it's very attainable for almost anyone.
Yeah. Um, cool. Well, I appreciate the clarity there. Thanks for fielding my question too, as well as
Sure.
everyone else's. So, all right, with that, we are at the end
Okay.
of our chat.
I
I'm
have
going
one
to,
thing if I could mention.
of
My
course.
book, Buddhist Heart, just came out on audio yesterday. So any of you folks that are audio book folks, Buddhist Heart is now available on audio.
Great. And could you give us like the one sentence summary of what that book covers as
Yeah,
distinct from your other books?
right. Buddhist Heart covers the Brahma Vihara practices. So equanimity, compassion, empathetic joy, and loving kindness, or what I call unborn love. It also goes into forgiveness. And it goes into a couple of other things, gratitude practice. And so it's really essential practices. I think every practitioner should know these practices well. And I present these from the perspective of the absolute. So they're presented in a different way than you've normally seen them.
Interesting. I'll certainly be picking that up myself.
Great.
So yeah, so I guess there you go. You can pick it up on audio if you want to. Thank you, Mugen, for your time and your teaching. This was really a blast for me. I'm sure that the folks in the audience got a lot out of it as well. I hope you
Yeah,
had
it's great
some
to be
fun
here,
too.
John. And let me know when you want to have me come back. I'm happy to do it.
Let's do it again. Let's run it
Good.
back.
Sounds good.
All right. So anything
Wish
that you
everyone
want to say
well.
before we close, Mugen?
No, just it was good to be here, and I really wish everyone well in their practice. It's all available to you. You just have to do it.
That's a nice place to end. Thank you so much, Mugen. And thank you everyone who's here, everyone who's watching for your time, your attention, your practice. Have a good evening. Bye, everyone.